Hey everyone, it's Helen from S&B Deal Hunter. Today we have Tato Corcoran with us, an acquisition entrepreneur who owns a marble manufacturing business. I know I'm very excited to hear Tato's story. So Tato, it's great to have you on today.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Well, first, tell us about your background, how you got into business acquisitions first, and yeah.
Yeah. So I had a almost 10-year career in the tech space. I started that right after leaving college, did that up until I moved on to what I'm doing now. And had an amazing experience, loved every, year of it. But like always knew that I was going to do my own thing. I just didn't really know like how that was going to take shape. And so honestly, the COVID closures, putting us work from home kind of like launched everything that I'm involved in now. I started spending more time in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where real estate is a lot more affordable. Realized that I could buy rental property, which is something that being born and raised in California, I don't really think to do right away, especially at a young age. So started buying rentals, fell absolutely obsessively in love with real estate. I still am. I love real estate more than anything. I think it is hands down the best investment and it's so much fun. But it's definitely like a longer term gain, right? Like with some exceptions, of course, you're not going to likely buy a bunch of real estate in a short amount of time that's going to cash flow you a ton of money. And I was needing to replace, tech W-2 and yada, yada. So I had joined a community of people who were also just as passionate about real estate investment, and a couple of them were starting to acquire small businesses. Everybody knows the statistic that like whatever it is, 10,000 boomers, retire a day or what have you. And like what 5% of small businesses actually sell, all those statistics. And so they were kind of putting those statistics to good use and snapping up, good deals. And I was like, gosh, I could do that. So it's a much longer story, but in essence, I found the business that I acquired now and kind of decided to do it without a whole ton of like actual knowledge. And it's been such an adventure. But yeah, that is the short version. I bought the business with the hypothesis that it would cash flow more monthly so that I could then buy more real estate. But 2 years in, obviously, it's taken all kinds of, different paths. But that was kind of like where things started.
Wow, excited to learn more. Very exciting. I guess I'm curious, what did the search look like for you? How long did it take? What deals did you look at? What were your
Yeah.
other friends who are working real estate buying and.
So I would say my search was like somewhat traditional, but kind of non-traditional in other ways. Traditional in that I use direct mail outreach, right? There's nothing profound about that. People use direct mail every day. I use direct mail to buy real estate, and then did it for the search. And basically mailed lists of owners who owned businesses that I thought were at least somewhat interesting and attractive, not necessarily anything I knew tons about, but I could maybe see myself, stewarding one day, and used that as like basically an educational feedback loop. Anybody who would call me, I would try to keep them on the phone for as long as possible and ask them as many questions about their business in general, or their business, but also business in general, like as I could. Lots of people were very open to that and really, really helpful and just kind of like helping educate me about small business. I would say the
And I
down.
guess before we even continue, I feel
Yeah,
like it's interesting because a lot of people in real estate use direct mail, but actually not that many people in the business acquisition
I'm
space who have
learning
reached
that.
out to owners, which
Yeah.
is interesting. What were you saying? Like what was your script like in the actual, piece of letter? Like what did
Yeah.
you say? Was it automated? Like where'd you pull the leads from? Like give me the
It's
lowdown
funny.
there.
Yeah, it's funny because now I've like done a couple of these podcasts and the feedback has been how profound the direct mail search was, which to me, it's like literally I've been doing so much direct mail for like 5 years that I'm like, oh my God, how am I like blowing people away with this? Like it's so weird to me. But yes, I'm learning that it's not something that everybody does. But in a nutshell, I use Data Axle, which is definitely a platform that a lot of people know about. We're lucky that in the state of Wisconsin, it is part of the Wisconsin library system. So long as you are a library card holder, you get access to it for free. It's a super expensive subscription, so that's really beneficial. And you can search a number of ways using that data source. I searched with a NAICS code. And I basically literally like one day Googled every NAICS code in the world. And you can just see the list of NAICS codes and like what they refer to. And I just pulled out ones that looked interesting. So like RV campgrounds, laundromats, just things like that. And would just pull lists using those NAICS codes, maybe scrub it a little bit for accuracy and duplicates. And that's pretty much it. My letter was almost exactly copy paste from what I send to all of my real estate prospects too. It always has my picture on it as a way to like immediately kind of like disarm them and make them feel like, if they were to pick up the phone and call, they would see who is going to answer on the other end. And it just basically says like a brief intro about who I am and my background in an informal way. Like, hey, I'm Tato, I live in the greater Milwaukee area. I've been investing in real estate for a long time, looking to invest in small business. You own XYZ small business. That's very interesting to me. Not only would I be interested in maybe talking about buying it, but even if that's not an appropriate conversation, like if you would just be willing to talk to me in general, I'm young and have nothing but knowledge to gain. And that's really it. And it was very, very, very successful. I had a lot of people call and just be like, wow, it's so great that like a young person is looking to, carry on a business legacy. Like there was a lot of intrigue, just like, in that nature, even if they weren't necessarily interested in selling, which was cool.
That's super interesting. And thanks for sharing what
Yeah.
you actually said to them. What was the response rate like, out of curiosity, from
So
these
I've
direct
been
mail?
asked that a couple times, and unfortunately I didn't keep really good like metrics of that, but that I used to track it pretty closely for real estate. And I would say that anywhere between like a 2 and 5% response rate is very achievable. Sometimes if the list is more niche or targeted, you maybe get something that's a little bit higher. But even if you hovered around like 3%, like if you think about the volume of letters you can put out, 3% of that is actually a lot of calls. The other thing too is like, with direct mail, that's immediately a warm lead, right? If someone bothered to pick up the phone and call you, they're not calling to say, I have absolutely no interest whatsoever, like never call me again. Like maybe once in a great while, someone will take the time to do that. I would say, 19 times in 20, there's at least some level of interest. So people get really hung up on the response rates, which like are important for sure, but it's almost more important to understand that they're all warm leads.
100%. And how many, and so basically that was the only way you were finding sellers, or did you also
That was
look
it.
on market?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. I think maybe I looked on Biz myself for like a day or two, but I never like got to a place where I spent any time there. Again, I'm just like used to that kind of off market hustle, right? From real estate. Now, the ironic thing is that I ended up buying a business that was listed through a broker. So I ended up coming into contact with somebody who's a local small business broker. And despite all the direct mail outreach, I of course engaged with him, right? Like, why not? And, kind of describe my buy box, this and that, and ultimately moved forward. So that is kind of like the irony of the whole thing. But
With the deals that you've reached out to off market, how many conversations did you have with sellers? Did you get anywhere with any of those conversations, or what did that look
definitely,
like?
yeah, no, I got pretty far down the line with a few of them for
Oh,
sure.
wow.
But then it just so happened to coincide with, the time that I was spending with this broker on this particular business that then of course I acquired. Um, I had countless phone conversations, dozens and dozens. People are very generous with their time, if they're willing to pick up the phone and chat with somebody who seems ambitious and interested in what they're doing. And I probably went and visited, I don't know, maybe half dozen to a dozen businesses that were actually legitimately very interested in selling, where we were like, having tactical conversations about that. I didn't put anything off market under LOI because at that point I had, begun to pursue the business that I then acquired.
Got it. Wow, that's fascinating. And what did your buy box look like, I guess, as you started having these conversations? Where did
Yeah.
it sort of
Okay,
pivot into?
this is embarrassing, but I'd have to go back and reread it, to be
Mhm.
honest, just because the last 2 years have been like such a blur. But I think I said like 3 to 400,000 SDE, like definitely small, right? Like I didn't know anything that I knew now. So I want to say it was like, yeah, somewhere just south of 500,000 in SDE. Um, Obviously I had a geographical constraint. I wasn't willing to buy something outside of my area. Um, I think I was willing to spend roughly $1 million. Can't remember if I had anything else like specific listed. Maybe I had some sort of employee count. The truth is though, like, again, I went into it so undereducated that like I wouldn't have even known the difference between 2 employees and 20 at that point. I ended up buying a business with 2 employees, and that's like a whole other thing. But yeah, I just like had no idea what I was doing. And I'm the first to say that, I just kind of went for it and like hoped for the best, which is, great
Well,
tactic. I
well,
roll.
look, look, it's better than a lot of folks who tire kick for years and never actually make progress, right? So
There's definitely two sides to that coin, right? Like I get reached out to now a fair bit, by searchers, and I love talking to them and hearing everybody's stories. There's definitely people who are like, oh, I've been at it for 3 years. And like to an extent, I'm kind of like, cool, like what are you waiting for? On the flip side, like anybody who listens to any of the content I put out, I had a really hard time, my first couple of years. So I'm not saying how I did it is like better. But
got it. No, that's interesting and eager to hear more about that. But I guess first, what sort of drew you into the marble manufacturing business?
So this particular business had two things going for it. One, it was in the real estate building and renovation space. So I at least felt like I had some sort of, I don't want to say attachment to it, but like affinity to it. I knew that building here in the Midwest is still going, really aggressively. Renovation is obviously very aggressive right now as like trades drop off, right? Like there's not enough people to backfill the trades and yada yada. But the truth to the answer is that this particular seller had had their business listed for at least a year or 18 months. And he had started at, whatever high number and was down to whatever number. And the broker called me. Our initial conversation was like him pitching me on the business and me being like, respectfully, like, thank you for your time, but I don't know anything about manufacturing, right? So I wouldn't even consider that. And then fast forward a month, 3 weeks, a month, the broker called me back and he was like, so here's the deal. My listing is about to expire with this gentleman and he's just going to close his doors. Like he's not moving on to another broker. He's just, saying goodbye. He's like, so, if you want to come at least look at the real estate, like more or less like name a price and probably he at least won't be like, no, F off, and so I did exactly that. I went one night after business hours to talk to him, look around the building, etc. And I was like, you know what? This is my opportunity to buy something truly at real estate value, but also get the business along with it. Which aside from my own time and sanity is pretty risk-free, right? And so that's what I did. So that's the truthful reason why I ultimately executed. Now I feel like the market is like a great fit for what I'm doing. But I didn't really know that at the time.
No, that's super interesting. And how did you structure, when you went to visit, I guess, what did that visit look like? What were you
Yeah.
looking for? And what made you
So
decide to pull the trigger?
everything is like framed with I didn't know, right? Like I just like had no idea what I had no idea about. I brought a friend who is very familiar with the commercial real estate space here in our city. And I was like, walk the whole area, familiarize yourself with this entire building and tell me whether it's something that you think a tenant would rent. That was really what I cared about, right? Like if it all went to shit in a handbag, can I rent this building? And that was like, check, check, check. Like he was like, yep, great size, great location. There's some features about the building that are really attractive, etc. I did have a lengthy conversation with the seller and I wish I could remember what I asked him. I mean, I'm sure I just asked him basic questions like, what was your background? How did you grow? How would you grow it now? If that's what you were going to do. And he had all the right answers for sure. Like he had definitely been down the road with a couple other sellers and is just generally, a person who knows what he's doing. I'm sure he explained what they made and how they did it and walked me around. It's mostly like blackout. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered. Like there's nothing that I don't feel there's anything I could have done differently to be more prepared for what I was doing. And I think that that's not to like skip ahead. I'm sure we'll get to this, but it's kind of a testament to like how small I bought. That's kind of a double-edged sword. I just bought a really, really small business.
That's interesting. And how did you end up structuring the deal, especially with the real estate
It
involved?
was pretty straightforward actually, because I was able to just get a real estate loan. So there was a local bank who I was familiar with just based on, my other real estate investments here. And they lent on the building. So, and then I have a $50,000 seller financing note too that I did like in part, to to bring some additional capital to the table, but mostly I did that to kind of keep the seller's skin in the game for a period of
Yeah,
time. Really, really glad I did, and would advise most people to do the same.
100%. I would never do a deal without seller financing. Makes the only thing tying the seller to the transition, so it makes a
Yeah.
ton of sense. So basically, you got the business for free with the
Yes,
real estate.
I did. Yeah. I always tell people like, of course, so much, like an indescribable amount of time and sanity of mine has been invested into this business, but monetarily I did acquire it for free.
Yep. Okay, that's great. No, that's super interesting. And so it's interesting you went with a real estate loan versus most people that, go SBA and
There was no advantage for me to do SBA, like at all.
100%.
It was actually all disadvantage. So yeah, and I mean, again, something nobody would have known, but it was timed perfectly. Like my interest rate is like 4%, Um, so it's a
Fantastic.
10,000 square foot building. I pay $3,500 a month. I mean, that's nothing. Like I couldn't even rent a place half that size today. So in a lot of ways, it worked out wonderfully.
And what was your time investment throughout this whole process? You
Oh
still
my
had your other
gosh.
real estate projects. How much are you working to get this under contract?
Yeah.
And
So the contract period and due diligence period were really like they were fairly simplistic. In large part, again, due diligence, like I had no idea what the fuck I was doing or looking for. So my due diligence was like, I don't even know, like pretending to check his bank statements. I mean, I just had no idea. The best part about that time period was generously, the seller was willing to begin training me full time the day that we signed our LOI. And I jumped all over that.
wow.
So I basically got it was like a good 2 full months of seller knowledge full time every single day at zero additional charge. I think in some ways, like he definitely was just like being generous. Also, I think it was like buying back some of his time, like he didn't necessarily want to do that on the back end. He just kind of, it was June 30th. So summertime, kind of wanted to wipe his hands and walk away. But it was such valuable time. Like I treated that as a full-time job. I was there 8 to 10 hours a day, every single day, completely for free, learning whatever I could. Literally, I showed up on the first day. He handed me the company phone and he was like, here you go. You're going to want this. Let me know if you have questions. Like it was diving
I love
off
that.
the end. It was crazy. So
Best way to learn.
it's really, yeah, absolutely. It's stressful as hell. And like I said, I blacked out a lot of it. And I came home so many nights unable to speak any more words until I woke up the next morning. But I wouldn't have traded that.
Wow. And I guess what did you learn those first 2 months that were kind of unexpected? Or I guess this was what did you learn that, made you to continue to have conviction in the business to buy it since this was, still pre-purchase?
Yeah. Almost nothing, just shy of like discovering bankruptcy or, something heinous about the building. But almost nothing was going to stop me. That's a very much a personality thing. It is not at all representative of like, knowledge that I have or like, oh, based on my experience. No, it's just like when I do something and I've like moved down that path, like I'm not gonna just revert and start over. Um,
But to be fair, it probably made you feel a lot more confident in the business having, effectively worked in it for 2 months and understanding how it
yes. And
operated.
even like on my worst days, I would write out the absolute worst case scenario. And truly the worst case scenario was I wasted time, I wasted a little bit of capital, and I wasted my sanity. And beyond that, it was just shut the business down, clean the building, and rent it. Like, and so I think that was probably like something that helped a ton in that. Like I had a lot of really bad days. Like I'm the first to describe how terrible they were and be like, you know, SMB acquisition is not for the faint of heart. But really, if you do the worst case scenario exercise, nearly always you're going to find that it's really not that bad.
Yeah. No, I want to hear some of these stories. Like what happened to make you sort of
I think that, so first and foremost, I had never managed a single person in my entire like tech career, much less like a team of people who you needed to show up for you every single day. So that was probably my single biggest point of just obscene discomfort and naivete. I had never relied on an employee. I've always been an individual contributor. And learning that is just so challenging, especially coupled with like, so if you started the business like my seller did, and you know everything about the business, then like nobody can really like give you shit or lie to you or like try to use the situation to their advantage, right? I knew fucking nothing about nothing. I was completely reliant on these people to get me through the day. That was just a really like, that was a bad mix. Out of it, I got a gentleman who I consider my partner now. Like he doesn't necessarily have ownership, but I very much treat him like a business partner. And now he's a really good friend, who I retained from day one, and that's it. Like there was nobody else. So he and I kind of rebuilt things from the ground up, and he's really the only employee I have who I wholeheartedly trust everything that, he says. I don't distrust my other employees. It's just that like, I trust this person like 100 times more and the rest of them, like all the employees I've been through were either like garbage or they literally just like use things to their advantage. And I finally figured it out and how to let them go. So that was the biggest thing that is challenging. And people management up to this point is still really challenging, but that was really, really hard. Like being, vulnerable to having to get information from people and not knowing whether, the information they're giving you is accurate. And then also too, like everything related to the run up in raw material costs, supply chain, all that in general, but specific to the building industry. Like if anybody was in building 2 or 3 years ago, they would be able to, attest to this. It was just madness. Like it was complete chaos. The business was growing like head over heels without me even trying, just because like even though we had a relatively small customer base and a concentrated customer base, they were growing like crazy. They could not build houses fast enough. So I took over this business. I don't know anything about it. It's growing like gangbusters without me even trying to grow it. And all the while, all of my prices are going up on me, like my material prices like crazy. And I don't even know it. I don't even know how to go to my customers and ask for a higher price, much less, understand that doing that means, 6-month delay in contracts, blah, blah, blah. It was such a mess. So
Wow.
I bled money for almost a year, like so bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it was hard to have this raising price conversations and still, I mean, while they were growing and
Yeah. I mean, it's just really hard to come into a business with a customer base that's been with my seller for a really long time, show up and say, hey, I'm the new owner. I'm young. I'm a girl. I don't know anything about what any of you people do. But your price has to go up 35%. It's just like very difficult to do that with tact and success. And so I had to just kind of chunk it down. I was like, okay, I have to accept that I'm in this place of extreme financial discomfort, but the best thing I can do is have a seamless transition. Most of our customers would tell you that they didn't even know the business sold for the first like 6 months. Like they had no idea, which is something that I'm proud of. So I'm like, okay, let's make this seamless. I'm going to outlearn anybody and outwork anybody. And really like get my sea legs on. And then at that point, I'll go have that conversation because now I've earned the trust of my customers. And I'm glad I did that. It just made for like a really long time of, not making money. So.
and was it that you were actively like, I guess, losing money, or was it just that
Yes.
you weren't? Oh, wow.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's funny. Like you hear on all the podcasts and Ed Milet and Tony Robbins and whatever, like, oh, when I was a starving entrepreneur, I maxed out every credit card and did this, that. I was like, holy shit, it's real. I refinanced a property. I sold a
Wow.
property. I pulled every credit card you can imagine. This was the single smartest thing I did was pull a line of credit day after closing because, well, I didn't know it at the time. I did it just because I needed my, just to get my hands on capital. But as it turns out, had I waited, they would have had just garbage financials to go off of, and they would have been like, we are not going to give you a line of credit. But they did, fortunately. Yeah, I mean, I just I don't know. I found 200 grand in the cracks of my couch. Like it was wild,
And
wild.
what changed after that year? I guess how quickly did you learn the business and sort of
Um,
figure on sort of like understand what what the
yeah,
triggers were?
I had like a very comfortable grasp of the basics after 6 months. Like I could comfortably speak to the product. I could comfortably sell it. I could understand generally how the day-to-day should run, how scheduling should run, etc. After a year, I was like, okay, I'm definitely fluent. I don't know everything for sure. Like there's still a ton I don't know, but fluent after a year, like very comfortable with that. What I've figured out now, the best way to like describe it is I feel like my first 6 to 12 months was just like extreme education, right? Like understand the business, understand the product, understand, your customers, blah, blah, blah. And then the next 6 to 12 months were like, okay, really like dial into awesome employees, like build an awesome team. Cause that was a whole other, like, we didn't even talk about that. That was a complete shit show, but really like build up an awesome team. Today, I can speak very fluently to the business. I have an amazing team who I'm super, super proud of. Now I'm moving into this phase of how do we actually run a profitable business, right? Just because we're growing and we've, figured out our pricing and have a great team doesn't always mean that you're making money. Like there's just so many like facets that go into that. And so this year I'm extremely focused on profitability, and just figuring out how we really dial that in. And I'm not sure that I would believe that you could do that without doing the prior things first.
That's
So,
super interesting. And I guess is this year two now, year three, or
yeah. This is end of year 2. So June 30th, today's June 11th, June 30th will be my 2 year.
and at what point did you decide that like profitability was sort of the focus? Was it after year
Beginning of this
one?
year, we spent the second half of last year healthily profitable. Like I was definitely very happy with that. The downside is that I took all that profit and reinvested it into the business. We actually found a similar business in St. Louis that was closing down and we acquired all their assets. So plus side, made money, reinvested it into the business, and into growth. And we absolutely had to do that. Like there's no way that we would have been totally bottlenecked had we not done that. Downside is that I was like, oh man, I just worked my butt off for all that money and it's gone. So I'd like to redo it. Re-earn it. Yeah. And also too, like I said, feeling comfortable with the people that I have and just feeling more powerful in general,
Yeah.
confident, I guess is a better word. Yeah. More confident. Just feeling like, okay, I feel empowered to make decisions to possibly affect our bottom line. And so let's see how far we can take that.
And that's interesting. And with the acquisition of the assets in St. Louis, that was to expand capacity, or did you buy their book of business?
Nope, just capacity. He actually interestingly kept his book of business and he outsources his
Oh,
projects to a much bigger manufacturer. Yeah, definitely an interesting play on, goes to show that there's 100 ways to run a business. But he kept all of his customers. He actually kept most of his employees too. They just install product now, but they don't actually manufacture anything. So it was just to be able to expand our own production line, which like I said, it was totally essential. Like we were completely maxed out on what we could do.
wow. And what does your day-to-day look like now?
So, it's like controlled chaos. It's still very chaotic. No 2 days are the same. Um, Historically, my days have been almost 100% reactive, not proactive at all. Now I feel like I walk that line like 50-50. I'd love to be in a place where I'm really not reactive at all, and most of that is delegated and I'm only proactive. I have no doubt that I will get there all in due time. But I spend the few first hours of my morning just making sure that everybody is doing what they should be doing and that the appropriate priorities are being addressed. And then I still have a fair amount of meetings and customer meetings. So I take those until like midday, sometimes early afternoon. And then I spend my afternoon doing stuff I want to do and also like focused work time. I found that at my shop is not the ideal place to do like actual focus time. So I try to be really diligent about like building that out.
And how involved are you with your, I guess, your various real estate projects now, or is this taking up sort of the bulk of your time?
Good question. So I kind of a mix of answers, because during this whole time I ended up finding a life partner and getting engaged, and I found him through.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I found him through real estate. So kind of funny enough, we had similarly sized real estate portfolios. And so now we've merged them. He is most active in that business because he's a general contractor and builder. And so he builds all of our rentals. I also have just like had zero capital to contribute to like that side of what we're doing. So he's contributed all the time, effort, and capital. Great business partner to have. Um, but I still do a lot of the deal finding. And back to your point about what made you want to focus on profitability, that was it in a lot of ways too, like jokes aside, he's brought everything to the table on that side of what we're doing. Like he's the person who's like keeping that going. And so it's been really important to me to get back in the game in that way and be able to contribute, financially to that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm curious, looking back, you basically, you came into this buying the real estate, you effectively got the business for free, if you will. Would you do it all over again? If you
I've been asked
if
that before, and it's a really tough question to answer. I really don't know, but I will say this. I will say that in the last 2 years, I have learned more and grown more as a person than I probably have, no exaggeration, in the last at least 10. And while it's immensely painful at the time, I look back and I really am like super proud and wouldn't trade that learning and growth really for anything. Like I just feel way more empowered as an individual. Um, so I would for sure still leave my job and for sure still do something really uncomfortable, because that's like entrepreneurship is there for the taking and wealth is there for the taking just because of how uncomfortable it is. And like the common human is just not willing to embrace that discomfort. So the fact that I did that, I wouldn't change.
and would you go and buy another business moving forward, or what are your
Um,
thoughts on that?
I definitely am still a huge believer in buying businesses for sure. This will not be the last business that I buy. I know that for sure. But I think there would be a lot to be said for like, um, I don't know, maybe finding somebody similarly aged to us. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I had no idea what ETA was. I didn't know there was an ETA community. I didn't know there was, an SMB acquisition community. Oh, well, I probably never would have found it after the fact. But if I could go back in time, I would have found somebody like the couple of folks who I found in the community who are a couple years ahead of me in their path, but still similarly aged, who have a ton in common with me and who I really jive with. And I would have either worked for them for free or, whatever the arrangement is, and just like, yeah, like work with them alongside of them in their business for as many days as I could or as many months as I could, before going off on my own.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. No, and do you have a partner in this, or did you do this all
No,
by yourself?
nope, I'm by myself. And so I think that's a lot of it too, right? Like it's already lonely, but like when you're the only person who at 7 at night is like trying to figure out how to recruit overdraft fees and make sure that ADP releases your payroll in the morning, even though, you've overdrawn your account, like, oh my God, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
So
I cannot imagine running a business by myself. So
yeah.
props to you. That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Well, thanks.
seriously a feat. No, that's it. I guess, um, I want to be sensitive of time, but any sort of final words of wisdom, especially for, first time business buyers out there.
Yeah, I always tell people just start somewhere. Like there's nothing scary about sending a few hundred letters to business owners with your name on it, saying that you're interested in learning more or buying their business or whatever. Sending out letters does not mean like all of a sudden you've signed an LOI. Like it's very non-committal. Just start getting the reps. Like at least go to the gym and park in the parking spot. You don't have to walk in, but just like go, take a phone call, be super uncomfortable. answer the phone and say, I'm the first to say I don't know anything about anything, but I'm really interested. Like, what can you tell me? Like, just like accept where you are and don't let it stop you from doing something.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
100%. Well, that's great advice, Tato. Really, really appreciate your time today. And I guess last question
Go
for
for it.
me is just,
Yeah.
if people want to reach out, where can they find you? What's the best way
Yeah.
to contact you?
So they can always email me. You're welcome to put my email in the show notes. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to really like engage on Twitter too. I'm trying to be more Twitter active, since that's where the ETAers seem to collaborate and share funny memes and also tidbits of wisdom.
And sob stories too, I guess.
Yes.
So
Oh yeah. No shortage of those.
yeah, well, I'll definitely include that. Thank you so much for your time again.
Yeah,
Very
thank you.
excited for what the next, couple years is gonna look like for you. And
Yep.
so I'm excited to continue following your journey, Tato.
Thank you so much.